Hey everyone, I'm Scott Cunningham, aka Scott's Business, and today we're going to be talking about financial contingency planning with sort of a general focus on setting yourself up for success in finance. We're going to be covering everything from you should have a safe with important documents and such stored in it, all the way down to crypto, hardware wallets, emergency supplies, everything that you could possibly think of. And you can do the minimum amount, you can do the medium amount, you can do the a lot, you could do the extreme amount. We'll go through all of this, but essentially this is going to put you on a much better financial footing, and more importantly, make you significantly more confident in being able to invest in the future because you've covered anything that might come up. And if you ever have to lower your means or get some money like an emergency fund, you've got all these things covered. And when you have all these things covered, you can invest much more stress-free and sleep soundly, knowing that you don't have to liquidate at a loss and sell things at a loss just to be able to get some money that you need access to. Instead, you're set up, you're ready to go, and then you get into really building out your wealth. So we're going to be diving into everything that I'm doing. This isn't financial advice or anything like that. Obviously, for really important matters, consult a professional financial advisor, tax consultant, etc. But this is what I do. And, it's going to just be general recommendations that are going to be really helpful for you. Maybe a few specific things, but very general, not like invest in this specifically, but more so just in general, looking at broad assets, not individual, crypto buys and stuff like that. So we're going to be diving into all of that in just a quick moment after a word from my sponsor.
A big thank you and shout out to my sponsor, Cake Wallet, which is an open source, non-custodial Bitcoin and Monero wallet that also has a built-in exchange. It's available on iOS and Android.
Thanks again to my sponsor. So let's jump into this. And a real quick note before we start, I have my fan on because with all these lights and things, it started to get much more hot inside the studio. So I need to have a fan running. Let me know if this affects the audio or not. I think I fine-tuned it to the perfect amount and using Adobe Audition that you guys actually shouldn't be able to hear it at all. Whereas for me, it's very, very loud and very, very obvious. So I'm hoping that all that is clean and the audio doesn't sound, jumbled or anything. So let me know if you do notice a lower sound quality. I will sweat instead of if it's going to improve the audio. So that's fine. Anyways, let's jump into it. For your fiat, what your actual Canadian US dollars, your sovereign currency denominated dollars, essentially. I have multiple bank accounts. This is key. You want to have a bank account that is like a local bank, or, well, there's a few things you could do. So you generally would want to have one like state bank that can give you a lot more features and things and offer financial advisors and whatever. And then you want to have like a local bank where if there was ever an issue, the local bank is less likely to be aligned with the exact same interests as a centralized bank. So I use both. And I also suggest having one bank that's like purely online. But I did that with the two. So, I mean, you can figure out what works best for you, but you should never have a single point of failure in your finances, essentially. I've approached finances the same way I've approached cybersecurity. I went to school for 4 years, as many of you know, for networking and IT security. So I approach my finances with that same mentality. There should be no single point of failure that is going to knock out the majority of my wealth. And an easy way for me to spread out that risk is to simply have two bank accounts at the very minimum, so that you're spreading that out a little bit. If one bank account, for whatever reason, closed, something happened, everyone decided to withdraw their money at once and crash the bank, whatever. If you have at least multiple bank accounts, you're not, so tied down to that one situation. And just whenever you can do this in any of these financial things we're going to be covering, whenever you can have multiples and spread out the risk without lessening security, and taking a hit somewhere else, then that makes sense. I'm not too worried where I'm like, oh, if I have two bank accounts, it's too hard to manage or something like that, where it's actually going to negatively affect me. I think it's just a beneficial thing to do. So in line with that, 2 stock investing accounts, one with your bank, or something better, and then one with like a third party of some kind, so that they're not at all connected. I mean, you could just go 2 third parties or 2 different banks. I have one with my online bank, one with my actual normal centralized bank, and then a third party account with Questrade. I used to use Wealthsimple, but I'm not a fan of their model. So that's what I do for stock investing accounts. Again, same issue. If there was ever something that happened in my stock account, even if it's not like they are stealing your money, but what if something happens and then you lose access to your account for even a week, let's say? That could still be a big deal, and you still might need to make trades or do something. And if at the very least you can access half of your stocks on the other account, that matters. That makes a difference. So I do think that it is beneficial to do. It's a little bit more challenging to track. I would say in terms of like tracking your portfolio and how things are going, the most challenging thing is like splitting up your stock accounts and your crypto accounts. But outside of that, having like multiple banks doesn't really make it that much harder. In terms of how much you should have saved, generally you want at least 6 months of your expenses saved, just like in your bank or wherever. And I also keep an extra 3 months of expenses in cash. This way, I've got like a 9-month runway in case something happens, or my income stops coming in, or I lose my job, or whatever it happens to be. You just got backup set in place. And what these things do, these 4 things, is it really just makes you much more confident and secure in your investing, knowing that you can handle things coming your way. If something were to happen, you're covered. Realistically, the most basic thing you can do is just have that emergency fund. But I'm always going the extra step and spreading out my risk where possible. Though it's unlikely your bank account will be closed, it takes literally no effort to open up another bank account. And as long as you have the minimums to avoid paying fees, of course, you don't want to be paying fees, then there's no reason why you shouldn't, because it's really not making your life harder, and it's just preparing you for that potential reality that could happen. And it has happened to many, many people, especially in the crypto space, that people have had their bank account shut down. In fact, the CEO of Library, which is now Lab from Mars, his wife's account, and even their child's account were all closed down just because he is the CEO of that company, and it's all crypto related and everything. So there's lots and lots of things that can happen with bank accounts and things like that. And you don't want to wait for it to happen to deal with it. If you've already prepared, then you're set. Again, many of these situations probably are never going to happen, but you can invest more securely and confidently knowing that you're covered in every aspect. Holding cryptocurrency is very, very ideal. The main thing that you just want to keep in mind is that you have a wallet that is yours and you control, not on an exchange. And ideally, you'll use a crypto hardware wallet, but we'll cover that a little bit further down. Right now, we're just kind of doing the basics of what I would ask that, or what I would recommend or do myself if I was like not going all the way. And then we'll talk about what you could do if you're really trying to go all the way with your security and your financial preparedness. Having scarce assets like precious metals and cryptocurrencies that are deflationary or extremely scarce and mimicking gold, like Bitcoin, things like of that nature. It's always important to have things like that are going to go up against inflation, and essentially they're good defensive assets. You might not call Bitcoin a defensive asset because it's so volatile, but in my mind, precious metals and things like Bitcoin are long-term stores of wealth. I would recommend that you store gold in a safe at home. Talk a little bit more about physical security later on, and or in a vault service as well. Maybe kind of splitting it up so you're, again, spreading out that risk. But I don't really like the idea of leaving my gold with the bank, because then I'm just going back to that same issue of putting more of my wealth assets in like a centralized bank is not really what I want to do. But it might offer you just that little bit of extra protection depending on how much gold or precious metals you have. And the great thing again about Bitcoin and like a lot of cryptocurrencies, you could access this anywhere in the world, bring all of it with you everywhere you go, withdraw it in cash in any country from like a Bitcoin ATM. Lots and lots of things you can do there. In terms of being able to spend cryptocurrency, I highly recommend, and what I do is I have Dash, Bitcoin Cash, and Litecoin. Essentially cryptocurrencies with fees for transactions that are a cent or around a cent or less. And what I do with these cryptocurrencies, I usually keep around $8,000 to $10,000 worth so that I just have a really solid extra backup, essentially kind of mirroring my 9 month of expenses, but in the form of cryptocurrency, so that I'm also protected if, someone came in and robbed all the money from my safe and or the bank's closed or whatever it happens to be. Just more ways to spread out that potential risk and having more access to more ways to be able to spend money. And what you can do with all of these, you can purchase gift cards. There's a lot of places that accept crypto directly. You can pay bills through a service like Bitcoin Well. You can access your crypto through an ATM, like I said, for Bitcoin, and you can spend it worldwide. And a lot of the same things that we had for Bitcoin, just obviously minus the transaction costs and speed and stuff like that. So this is more of my like spending currency, and I treat Bitcoin more like a long-term store of value, like digital gold, essentially. And then there's a couple more alternative spending methods that are definitely worth mentioning. Prepaid visas, which I can buy with cryptocurrency, and that essentially allows you to just spend anonymously and privately. You can buy gift cards through something like Bitrefill, as I was mentioning before, but you could also do that not with crypto. You can use payment providers like PayPal, Venmo, etc. I am not at all a fan. They're terrible centralized payment processors, but if someone wants to pay you in Venmo or someone wants to pay you in PayPal, I'm not going to refuse payment. I'm going to use that platform. And at the end of the day, still having another way to spend, even if it's centralized and, not that great, it's still better than nothing. And for the same reason, it's like, why am I using a centralized bank then? Because it still offers you a lot of benefits and it's still very useful, whether or not I agree with what they're doing or I like what they're doing, essentially. You got to be very amoral about your finances because it's mostly going to be negatively affecting you if you're like, oh, well, I don't want to use a bank because of, it's too centralized. And then, something happens and you lose your keys to your crypto and now you have no money. Like, obviously, you want to be very careful with that, but things happen. So you want to have as many possible places that you can access wealth as possible for any possible scenario that comes up. This is contingency planning, not just, something fun to do. This is actually trying to cover all possibilities. I've also got a crypto Visa card. There's a lot of these in the US, but almost all of them require KYC. So it depends what you are okay with and willing to do. Personally, I only use Bitvo because here in Canada, Bitvo is not KYC'd, and I can use their exchange or use their crypto Visa card. And it's fantastic. And I highly recommend it, but it's only for Canadians. I don't know of any non-KYC solutions outside of Canada, sadly. But it's something to look into. And if you don't mind KYC, then it's a great option for you. So further considerations, this is more like, previously we were talking more about the assets themselves. And this section I'll be talking more about like where you're storing your assets, where you should be putting them, how to secure them, protect them, just further considerations to keep in mind for setting yourself up the best possible way that you can financially. Taxes. Paying taxes and understanding taxes isn't super important as an employee, but as a business owner, it is the most important thing you can possibly do because you pay taxes after expenses. So as a business owner, you can save a ridiculous amount of money by knowing how the tax system works. And obviously it's different in every country. So this is a point where I would say you're actually probably better off paying a financial advisor or a tax consultant or something to find out how you can lower your taxes. It sort of depends on how much you're making for you to really be worried about it. But understanding your taxes is always going to be useful. And I said, not so much as an employee. I mean, it's still useful because eventually you could break out of being an employee and have a small business, etc. But understanding taxes in any regard is going to be useful for your life. And they should really teach that in school. In Canada, we have a tax-free savings account, which allows us to contribute a specific amount every year up to a restricted amount based on when you turned 18. But essentially, it allows us to invest that money tax-free. That's not very common in other countries, having like a similar thing. But something that is much more common is a retirement account. So we have a registered retirement savings plan, which is similar to like a Roth IRA, I believe, in the US. And, many countries have tax advantage accounts set up for retirees or some sort of tax advantaged account. If you have something like that, definitely take advantage of it and make sure you're maximizing all the benefits that you can get out of a tax advantaged account. In terms of your passwords and security, you should generally have a different password for all of your highly, highly, important, secure financial accounts, bank, your email that connects to the bank, all that kind of stuff. You should have a different password for everything. So you should have a password manager if you're actually, following that good practice. I have a backup phone in case there's an issue where I lose my phone and I need to be able to authenticate, like Authy, log into stuff, do things. I don't have the luxury or the time to try and go out, get a new phone, go through all the recovery processes. If I've already have it all set up on a second phone, I can just plug in my SIM and I'm ready to go. And beyond that, even if I lost my SIM, I also have a secondary SIM that I pay for monthly, just for very, very basic texting, calling, and 100 megabytes of data, so that I'm essentially covered in an emergency that something were to happen or my phone was destroyed or whatever, that I would still have a hot swappable SIM. And then I have SIM cards for every single cell phone provider in Canada that I could sign up with and just plug in and get going as well. Very, very cheap to do. SIM cards only cost like $5 to $10. And, paying $15 a month is a reasonable price for me to pay for the security that I know that I'll never have any issues if I lose my phone, and I'll have a backup ready to go instantly, hot swappable, etc. So I also think it's good to get a satellite phone, or at least I'm looking into getting one so that I'm not reliant on cell phone providers as well. And I have something to kind of get around that if I, bug out and go into a cabin in the woods, or you're lost somewhere, or whatever it happens to be. Having a satellite phone is a great way around that. So that's I don't actually have that yet, but that is something that I've got on my list of things to get. Having a safe that is fireproof and waterproof is so important. You can put your crypto hardware wallet in there. You can put important documents, your cash, all these things that are really important that need to be protected. And also, if there was like a fire or something in your home, you would also want those to not be destroyed. So you want a fireproof and waterproof safe. Surveillance and physical security is also extremely important. I just use basic Wi-Fi cameras, really, really cheap, like $20, $30. They record movement. They send it to your phone. Really, really great. And they're very, very affordable. And then obviously having locks, insurance, all the different things to up your security or being able to cover things if they are stolen, etc. Like home insurance, rental insurance, all that kind of stuff is very, very important to also consider and just keep in the back of your mind. I mentioned earlier crypto hardware wallets. I use Ledger, and I find it's the best, but it is the most expensive. So I've also tested and used SafePal, which is one of the most inexpensive. It doesn't offer as many cryptocurrencies as Ledger, but it is a great cheap alternative. And ideally, you would have two wallets so that you have your main wallet and then you've got your backup wallet for if something ever happened, you just reload and get everything back on your other wallet. So I've got two ledgers and I have one SafePal from when I was sent that for testing. I don't actually have anything on my SafePal, but I do have it there in case I need to use it. And then I can start using that as well. But for the ledger, whichever one you actually subscribe to, you want two of them in case something happens. For the ledger, that's obviously a little bit more unideal because it's so expensive already, let alone having two. You don't need to, but if you can afford it, it's definitely beneficial because say you need to access your crypto and someone steals your wallet or you lose it, then I have to sit and wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks for a ledger to come in and say the whole crypto bull run happens during that time. And because I was too cheap to buy another wallet for $180, I could lose out on hundreds of thousands of dollars of gains. So you got to consider that kind of stuff. It might seem, like a nuisance. I don't want to spend $180, but the amount of money that it could end up saving you, immense. It's just uncalculable. So again, you can spread out your risk by doing that, and you'd want to have your keys. The real risk is the keys themselves, the seed phrase that unlocks your crypto wallet. That's the real thing that you want to be concerned about because, for example, I could use my SafePal and my ledger. But if my seed words are both stored in the same safe as my ledger and my SafePal, then using those two wallets didn't give me any extra security at all. In fact, it really just made it much more inconvenient and I had to do twice as much work to do the same amount of stuff. So if you can at least make sure that you've got, the seed phrases in different spots and everything is set up perfectly security wise, you could go that extra step and have 4 crypto wallets. But, to each their own. It depends how far you want to go. When you get into things like crypto wallets, you have to spend a lot more money. So it really depends what you're trying to do. And along that line, you generally want to have backups, as many backups as possible for ways to access your wealth. This is just very, very generic. This is kind of just recovering everything that we've just covered. Wherever possible, have a backup where it doesn't affect security or convenience, essentially. And that could even be for have a backup of your seed phrase somewhere else, things like that. Emergency supplies. This one is kind of underrated for how much space I gave it because this could be a million things. And this is the majority of the feedback that I got from people when I ask people, what do you do or what is important to do for financial contingency planning? The majority overwhelming response that I got was related to emergency preparedness and prepping, which makes a lot of sense considering the last 2 years. There's a million things that you can do for emergency preparedness. You can go as small as you just have a little bag of emergency supplies. You can go further to have, a bunch of emergency food, firearms, ammunition, bows and arrows, water filters. You can go so in depth. You can have a bunker in your backyard for all I know. This one can be basically a million possible things. I haven't done as much as I would like to do for emergency supplies. For now, I've just got basic things that I need, emergency radio, solar power, solar powered batteries and all these kinds of things. I have the basic setup, but I don't have nearly as many things as I would like. A lot of people get really granular. They're thinking, okay, if we're talking an apocalypse scenario, there could be no internet, no electricity. So, you need physical maps, you need a compass, you need all these things that people would just not really think about to even worry about or to even understand how to use. We could be very crippled in the age of technology if we were ever to have some sort of, really big event like that could basically put us back into the Stone Age, and no one would really know how to do most things or even have stuff available to do those things. So Having those basic survival skills and having all that kind of stuff prepared is extremely important. I can't say enough how important it is, but I'm not going to be getting into, the long, infinitely long list of things that you could do for financial preparedness, or rather emergency preparedness. And I would recommend checking out the channel Canadian Prepper, who does an amazing job of covering all aspects of this. Shout out to him. For real estate, I'm a little bit iffy based on everything that's going on, the 2030 potential sustainability plan reset, all this kind of stuff. I'm sure if you already have real estate, obviously it's not like you're going to sell it, but real estate is not top of my list of things that I need to have. Once I'm a little more confident in where we're going in the future and how this pandemic and everything plays out, I'll probably buy a house. But ideally right now, I'm just getting to the point where I have enough money coming in passively that I could passively pay down the mortgage for a house. So it wouldn't be a huge concern where I'm beaten down by debt because it's all paid passively anyways. Something like that would generally be the way I would go about it. I wouldn't just be selling off all my crypto and just buying a house, and then now I'd have to, go back to work in order to afford money for food and supplies and my lifestyle and all that stuff. So that's the way that I'm going to go about it. Long-term deposit boxes are also great. I haven't really utilized this yet, but I'm sure as I get more and more assets and I want to use every possible venue I have, I will be taking advantage of something like that in Switzerland or something like that. Using privacy services is just a general useful thing to be doing. Secure browser, VPN, all that kind of stuff when you're doing your finances and accessing your finances, and not disclosing your finances to anyone so they don't know and they're not going to try to steal from you because you're a target. Opposite of what I do, essentially, because everything that I have is out there for everyone to see. So, and then last but not least, kind of generally summarizing everything up, not overly concentrating your wealth in one place, and especially not in places that have authoritative oversight, banks, etc. So always just keep in mind, a lot of physical assets and financial tools that are out there are easily influenced by the government and can be taken away from you, right? If I have gold, stocks, cash, money in the bank, a house, every single one of those things can be taken from you. You do not truly own it because it can be legally taken away from you, right? The only thing that cannot be taken away from you unless you give up and or they find the password is your crypto stored on a hardware wallet or on a wallet that you control and you own, and it's not on exchange. Though that's not nearly as secure as a hardware wallet. The reason that you would get a hardware wallet, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, I don't think I did. The reason that you would have a hardware wallet is because the access to your crypto is offline through the wallet. You have to do the PIN, connect, confirm physically, creating a multi-factor authentication that requires the physical device to do it. So it's essentially impossible for that to be hacked then. Online, because you have to turn it on and do all the things. So it's essentially impossible to have something like your ledger hacked and your crypto stolen. It's highly unlikely, but still technically possible that someone could steal your crypto from just a generic crypto wallet like MetaMask or Trust Wallet or whatever. Highly unlikely, but more possible than with a hardware wallet. And then we go to an exchange. If you're just leaving all your crypto on the exchange where you bought it, that is much more likely to be lost, hacked, stolen, maliciously used, etc. There's a million times that this has actually happened, and we can see it and go back and look at it. And it's this stuff happens all the time. So always keep that in mind, and just using your head and trying to have the best security procedures and practices everywhere possible. Don't have your name in your email that's connected to your bank account so that there's an identifying connection between the two, stuff like that. You want to avoid anything like that. You want to have your passwords all different and none of them are, related to you again. And they're very challenging to guess. And you can just auto generate them with that password manager that I mentioned earlier. But a lot of your wealth should be concentrated outside of central banks. Personally, I am a little risky because I have like over 80-ish% of maybe it's like 75 to 80% of my wealth in crypto. And that's generally not recommended, but 80% of my wealth is basically protected from ever being taken from me. Unless obviously someone can get the seed phrase, but that gives me a lot of peace of mind. You don't expect any of this stuff to happen to you, but you don't wait for it to happen because obviously you can't fix it when it's happening. It's already done. The only way that you can prepare for this stuff is by doing this now. And I understand that I'm giving the most detailed, extreme possible case possible, but you can pick and choose what things you want to do, how far you want to secure your finances. You can go even further than this because, Microsoft can like remote disable your account. And so, some people would go even further to say you should only be using Linux software, open source software that is not controlled by big tech or major corporations. You can really get down that rabbit hole. I've been looking into that a little bit more because I do think that is important. And you never want to have any possible, spot of point of failure that is going to just destroy your finances. And that could even be as simple as just access to your computer and your accounts and just getting online. So, even the simple things, it all adds up to better security and sleeping soundly and being stress-free through your financial journey, or at least less stressed out, because it's hard to be stress-free with how volatile crypto's been lately. But this is everything from me. I hope this gives you a good idea of what I do with my finances to just be the most protected and covered and, the lowest risk possible for any possible scenario that might pop up. I'm not as prepared for an emergency, like apocalyptic type scenario. I guess I would say the same of what I'm doing is focus on everything else first. And then once you're really well set up, you can start diverting money to emergency supplies, because, someone who doesn't even have an emergency fund is never going to be worried about like, oh yeah, I need to buy all this extra food that I might not even eat and throw it away in a cellar somewhere. Yeah, I don't think that's top of mind for people who can't even afford an emergency fund. So I would say emergency services are probably on the lower end of the priority. Get everything else set up first and then do that. I mean, you might have a lot of people who would argue the opposite and say, if you want to be prepared for an emergency, you got to be set up. But the reality is, an emergency like that is the least likely situation to pop up that you have to be prepared for. So you kind of want to go through it based on priority of what's most likely to happen and what you need to deal with, sooner than later. Let me know though, is there something that I've missed? Because I'm always looking to improve my finances and my financial security and stuff like that. So if there's anything that you can think of that I might have overlooked, or if you disagree with any of these points, I'd love to hear from you and how you're protecting your finances and spreading out risk where possible. Let me know if you're going to put any of these recommendations into practice, or, if you hadn't thought of any of these before and this has actually been helpful for you. Also, if you did watch to the very end, I always greatly, greatly appreciate it. You can let me know that you did so I can appreciate you more by commenting #1ham in the comments below. And that way I know that you watched to the very end. Anyways, I'm Scott Cunningham, aka Scottsy Business, signing off. Cheers.